Well, welcome everybody. Good morning. Very happy to see your fresh-looking avatar face on the stage. My name is Vicky. I am head of program and community at the Shortcut. I'm sure many of you have already known us and have maybe attend some of our events already. But if it's the first time you attend our event, the Shortcut is a place for social and professional integration in Finland. And we support our community in security, meaningful work, or create their own business. And we do this by offering free training programs, workshops, and events like you're attending now. Um, Community space in Maria 01 campus located in Helsinki city center. And I see already questions coming, but write it down and we will have a Q&A session right after the talk and you will be invited to stage if you have any questions about the topic of today. And today I'm really happy to have, Katarina is back and Mina, our special guest, co-founder of Finnwards, to join us, and we're gonna talk about a bit difficult but very important topic, money. How to negotiate your salary in Finland and how to find relevant information. Katarina will be moderating the talk, so I'm going to give the mic to her now.
Yes, thank you very much, Vicky, and welcome everyone. I'm new at the Shortcut. My name is Ekaterina, and I'm event intern. I start this interview with Minna, who is founder at Finnwards and a author of the blog about Finnish working life. So, Minna, very warm welcome, and please introduce yourself and Finnwards.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation this morning. Yeah, good morning, everyone else. My name is Minna Frank, and I have a company called Finnwards together with another person. And our mission is to help international professionals thrive in Finland. And we do that by producing self-guided online courses about working and living and playing in Finland. We do trainings about different aspects of Finnish culture and intercultural communication, and we provide coaching and consulting services. I have a personal background in international mobility myself. I've lived in a few different countries, and I'm living in Estonia currently. I'm now a so-called a trailing spouse, so we moved because of my husband's work. But I've also done a lot of international recruitment in my professional life. And I've worked as a manager and as a leader, and therefore been responsible for HR functions at different levels of complexity. And one of my sort of passions and one of the guiding principles in our work today is just workplaces. And that's why in my blogs I give a lot of information about Finnish working life and working conditions and people's rights and responsibilities as employees in Finland.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Minna. So let us maybe get right to it and start with our very first question. How to come up with a salary range for a job? If you are a foreign professional looking for a job, how do you find references? How do you know what to write on your job applications when you asked?
I mean, in Finland the practice is not to give the salary range in the job ad, which is extremely annoying. And I don't understand what that is based on, because every company, every employer has some sort of a salary range in mind when they are hiring people. Salaries don't just appear out of a thin blue air. They just don't appear. There's always a reference. And then sort of asking employees or applicants to state their salary wishes is a bit unfair. But if the ad says that you have to put it in, you do have to put it in, and then you have to come up with where, a proper salary range. The best source of information in Finland is the appropriate trade union. But obviously, to get personalized help with salaries, you need to be a member of a union, usually. But even for non-union members, there's a lot of information available online. Some unions publish at least some information on their salary surveys online. If a collective agreement is so-called generally applicable collective agreement, that's online as well, so you can see salary ranges there, appropriate salary levels there. And what the generally applicable collective agreement is, it's a collective agreement that applies to everybody in that specific field. And so no matter if you yourself are a union member or if your employer is a union member, it doesn't make a difference. If they operate in a field where there is a generally applicable collective agreement, those rules apply to that employment relationship as well. So trade unions, best source. There are different types of salary surveys online, like for example, Oikotie has a salary survey, but the problem with those is that they are not representative. So I wouldn't count on those for accurate information. One good way of doing this is that Duunitori has a tool where they combine Statistics Finland information with their own information. And if you use both Statistics Finland info and then the Duunitori's tool, you get a pretty good idea of the range appropriate for that position. And Statistics Finland has salary information both for public sector jobs and private sector jobs. You can search their open database based on occupation. The occupation classification for Statistics Finland is rather broad, and that's why it's good to combine that with Duunitori's tool. And those give a pretty good idea of the ballpark of a proper salary. But then once you've got that ballpark, then you obviously have to take into consideration the actual job that you're applying. Are you in the private sector, public sector, or a third sector job? What is the company like? What is the required educational level for that job? What are the range of responsibilities that you have to take care of if you get that job, and other job characteristics? And obviously your own qualifications in relation to the job requirements. But I think the best, if you're not a union member, the best combination is Statistics Finland info together with the Duunitori tool.
All right, makes sense. Then how about, how do you benchmark startup salaries then? It's not so easy to find trade union information for that. Or does normal trade union also apply to startup salaries?
Yeah, it depends. If the startup is in the technology or an ICT industry, it most commonly does apply, because both for technology sector and for the ICT, there is a generally applicable collective agreement that applies. So even if it's a small startup, now I can hear my own voice. Okay. Do you guys, can you still hear me? I'm having problems with my voice.
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. All right. So, for the ICT industry, and if the startup is in the ICT industry, it doesn't matter if they themselves are part of the employer trade unions or not. These generally applicable collective agreements still apply. But the general rule is that in basic jobs, there are salary ranges and minimum salaries that are set by these agreements. But the higher up you go, the more senior the job, more managerial responsibilities you have, it's less likely that there is a salary range that is set in some agreement. Both in the technology sector and in the ICT sector, those senior positions are usually such that the salary is negotiable. So even if a collective agreement applies, there's usually a set salary for sort of more basic jobs. There was a survey done a couple of years ago. It was done by Arkwright-X and Danske Bank, and it was a Nordic survey, and their purpose was to find out about salaries in the startup scene. And they did come up with some results. I mean, there were some respondents from Finland. There weren't that many. That I don't think this is necessarily a representative sample. But still, they have some information. Like, for example, it says that in technical positions, the average salary for a junior, someone who has up to 4 years of experience, the annual salary is 38,000 euros. And then if somebody has 15 years plus experience in the technical field, then the average salary is 98,000. But the sample here is so small that I would really not use these figures necessarily as a benchmark for anything.
I see. All right. So let's imagine that already we have come up with the right figure, named it on our application, and got inside. We are in the job. Now, how do we go about a gap between expat salaries and local talent salaries? Is that true, or is it a myth for Finland?
Well, I mean, there's no really. I can say that it's not a myth, and I can say that it is. I mean, it is myth. I mean, there's obviously plenty of anecdotal evidence to suggest that immigrant employees are subject to exploitation of different types. And there's also evidence, if you look at statistical evidence and large-scale evidence, that immigrant employees are often employed in jobs that do not correspond to their education level, or even if they are in that kind of jobs, they might be employed in the kind of jobs that are less well paid. Like, for example, doctors with an immigrant background are more likely to be employed in the public healthcare centers than in private clinics. And salaries in the public sector tend to be lower than in the private. And there's also data from around 2015 that says that immigrant salaries in Finland are about 91.6% of salaries of native-born Finns. However, that difference was explained largely by the variation in the immigrant group jobs, meaning that in that group there were more people who were in lower paid jobs than in the sort of the native-born group. So I don't think that internationals are systematically paid less than native-born Finns, but I do think that immigrant employees are definitely at a higher risk of being treated unfairly. And I think part of that is just a lack of information. Not enough information about their rights and rights as employees. Or, you know, they might be paid the same, but might not get, for example, because in some positions or some jobs you might get extra for an evening shift or a Sunday pay and things like that. Those might not be paid. So they are at a higher risk of being exploited, definitely. But I don't think that, for example, in the startup scene they would be, or any other industry, they would be systematically paid less, I don't think.
I see. How about gender gap? Is that real in Finland, or is it already equality? for us?
It is real. I mean, in the European data, the gender pay gap in Finland is higher than in the European average. A lot of that gap is explained by the gender segregation of the Finnish labor market, meaning that in Finland, professions and fields are highly gender segregated. And that creates part of that pay gap. So for example, if you go and look at the healthcare professionals, a large percentage of them are female. And then you go to the technical sector, for example, a large percentage of those are male. So part of that gender pay gap is explained by these sort of men and women being in different positions or different professions. But there is still the so-called unexplained gender gap, and that exists when we have taken all of these background variables into consideration. And depending on the field, this unexplained gap is different. In some fields, it's about 8%. In some, it's 11%. So, for example, for MBAs, I think it was, if I remember correctly, I didn't look it up, I think it was 8%. In university-educated engineers, it was around 6%, and lawyers around 8 or 10 as well. So there exists this type of unexplained gap. And in the startup survey that I mentioned, they also found that men have higher base salaries than women, even when experience and function and seniority and company size were accounted for. So there exists an unexplained gap as well in that sector.
I see. Now, I can say that for me, and I'm sure for many our guests today, salary negotiation initially, when you are taking the job, can be a little bit intimidating. So, for example, if you are offered a figure that you don't think is fair, how to go about it? Do you have any tips for this initial salary negotiation?
Yeah, in order to know if that's fair or not, you obviously need to have some sort of an understanding of the base salary in the field. And then you have to do research for that, the type that I mentioned before. And my tip is to find out as much as possible about the responsibilities of the job, and then try to match your skills and your experience to that, to those requirements, and come armed with facts and figures, and justify your salary ask. I mean, Finns don't respond well to unsubstantiated claims of excellence. So as long as you know what is demanded in this job, how well you fit that, and what do you think that's worth. But you obviously have to know what the salary range is. I mean, you cannot you cannot place your salary request on what you would make elsewhere in the world, because salary levels do not travel like that. So it has to be in reference to what that field is in Finland, and then how well you match. That's one. And then one thing is that it might be sometimes easier for employers. I mean, I don't know if it's easier psychologically or easier in budget-wise to think about, in addition to sort of just salary, to think about different types of benefits that you could possibly negotiate. You might not be able to raise your monthly salary, but perhaps you can negotiate some sort of benefits to go with that. Like, for example, maybe you would like to attend some very specific technical training that will give you some sort of a certification that's really expensive. Could your employer pay for that, for example? Do they have sports and culture vouchers? Can you negotiate additional paid vacation days, for example? So try to think about salary just beyond what you get in terms of money every month, but what additional things that you can possibly negotiate. Obviously, if somebody's moving from outside of Finland and coming to work at a specific job, you can negotiate relocation packages and things like that into that as well. Obviously, all of these benefits would then be taxed, but that's a whole different story. But anyway, I mean, if there's more to salary than just, or more to compensation than just the salary.
All right. My next question is about the culture about discussing the salary in the organization. How is it in Finland? Is it okay to ask your colleague what is their salary? Is it open information or is it a taboo? Can you benchmark with your colleagues how much they are getting as compared to you?
That depends. I mean, in general, Finns don't talk about salaries amongst each other. I mean, even very, very close friends generally do not know what the other one makes. But there are pockets in Finnish work life where pay transparency is more common than elsewhere. I mean, the tech industry, for example, is in the forefront of this. I mean, there are several companies in Finland who promote pay transparency amongst their employees. So, for example, Vinted is one, Go4 is another that promote this type of pay transparency. Sysart, for example, they have even an online tool where you can calculate or estimate your salary should you work for them. And there are other companies who very openly tell what their salaries are based on. So tech industry is leading in this way, in this sense. And I think that's part of their mission to be good employers and good places to work. Pay transparency increases the feeling of equality, for example. But in general, asking a Finn what they make a month might not be well received, but it depends on the context. There have been different types of campaigns, for example, by trade unions to increase pay transparency and increase these types of discussions. But I don't know how well that's actually worked. I just saw a survey that said that the percentage of employees who feel or think that salary systems and salaries are openly discussed in the company has actually decreased in the last 15 years, although we've had these campaigns. So it is clearly still something that's not very openly discussed. But tech industry is different.
Right. Now let's say an employee has realized that he is not getting or she is not getting paid enough and decided to ask for a raise. How do you go about that in a Finnish company?
Again, it depends a little bit. If the job or position falls under a collective agreement, the collective agreements usually have annual raises that come automatically. They might also have a system built in whereby your job performance is evaluated once a year, and that is, for example, usually the place where you can ask for a raise and where raises are discussed. They are usually situations that are sort of meant for that purpose. But if you don't work in a system like that, then again, I think if you go to a manager and you speak directly, but not bluntly. Directness in a sense that I would like to discuss my salary, please. I don't think that I'm being compensated the way that I should be. And then you come armed with facts. You obviously need to be aware how your job is evaluated. What are your own KPIs? What are the standards against which your job performance is evaluated. And when you have that discussion with your manager, you come armed with these facts that compared to this KPI, I've done X or Y or Z, and I've exceeded the expectations and so forth. So directness, but not bluntness. Sometimes when we discuss how sort of Finns do their communication, they are direct, but they are not blunt. In a sense, directness here means that everyone knows what we are discussing and what the topic of the conversation is, but it's still done sort of politely and in polite tone of voice and things like that. But yeah, but if you are employed currently in a Finnish company, your employment contract should state what your starting salary was, what is your salary structure, meaning what are the components of which your salary consists. For example, do you have a job demand level that's based on the job that you do, and then in addition to that, you are paid a portion that's based on your personal performance. Or, for example, you might have a salary system whereby you get some sort of a base salary and then a commission based on sales or something. But anyway, your employment contract should have that system named. It should also have the collective agreement mentioned. If your employment relationship falls under a collective agreement, it should state what that collective agreement is. So all of that should give you information. So how are you evaluated? How is your job performance evaluated? And again, you have to come up with facts and be armed with those when you negotiate the salary.
All right, so sounds like knowledge is the key, and of course also common sense. Mm-hmm. We are receiving some questions in the chat. I'm going to read from there. So Valeria is asking, I hope I'm not butchering the name. Valeria is asking, what about the differences between Uusimaa and other parts of Finland? Are there differences in salaries?
Yes, there are. Salaries in Uusimaa tend to be higher. In some fields, that regional difference is baked into the collective agreement. So already in the salaries for Uusimaa are higher. But sort of the difference depends on the industry, and it depends on what region you are comparing Uusimaa to. But there is usually a difference, yes. Somebody's asking for the links. Somebody's asking for the links of for these Statistics Finland things, and I have them here. Let me copy them in just a second.
Yes, I think also some of our guests already are sharing Duunitori link.
Yeah. Let me just a second.
Yes, while Minna is looking for the links, I'm going to just quickly say that if you have any questions, you can either write them in the chat or raise your hand, and we are going to invite you on stage with us and ask here.
Okay.
You can raise your hand by doing this.
Yeah. Let me just say that I put in the chat, I put the private sector salary, the link. It takes you to a page where you have different types of statistics. For example, salaries based on education, salaries based on occupation. These are in Finnish, but the Statistics Finland does have a lot of these terms that they use elsewhere in their site in English. And let me put the occupational, just a second, occupational classification in English here, so you can see what they use, for example.
We
Anna
had
is asking,
somebody
yeah.
sorry, I saw somebody raise the hand. Was it
Okay.
Vesna? Was it Vesnavi? Can you raise your hand again? Okay, I will invite you on stage. Second.
Yes, I'm here. First of all,
Hello. Yes.
thank you, Minna, for this session. And my question is, usually we put applications via LinkedIn, and sometimes it automatically recommends you, like, there's no salary range mentioned, so do you want to ask it? And I don't know what message it sends, but I have tried doing it, and I never had a reply on that thing. So what do you think about it?
That's tricky. Uh, that's tricky because, I mean, every once in a while I go on LinkedIn and I sort of type in Finnish palkkatoive, salary request, to see what kind of conversations recruiters are, for example, recruiters and job applicants are having in Finnish about this topic. And I don't think that I can sort of give you a very clear answer because some seem to think that being able to give the proper salary range in your request is a sign of your professionalism. And I find these arguments ridiculous. But anyway, and some say that if some recruiters might say that if we ask for a salary request, we expect for the applicants to give it, and that for some that functions as a test of some sort. So I find these conversations utterly frustrating because it anyway creates a hurdle that doesn't need to exist.
But like,
But
just a second.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I know. I mean,
Yeah, like I wanted to ask, like, should we or should we not, if there is no description about salary in the job description on LinkedIn, because it,
yeah,
in the just below the job description, it
yeah,
automatically
yeah,
gives you like there's no salary mention. Would you like to
yeah,
ask? So
yeah.
what would you recommend? Should we go? Is it a polite
That's
way
the
to
thing.
just?
That's the thing. I'm having a hard time recommending anything because I think the response depends on the person who sits on the other side receiving that request.
Okay.
Because I think that sort of function in LinkedIn is not a sort of a culturally appropriate feature in Finland. But I'm hesitant to say this because, I mean, it depends on the recruiter, it depends on a hiring manager who's at the other end.
Okay.
Some
Noted.
might not like the idea of starting to discuss salaries before they sort of even met you or read through your application. For some, it might be sort of, it doesn't ring a bell. So I'm having really hard time recommending anything because it can be tricky.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
That's why I'm sort of going like, oh, I don't know.
Okay, no
I
problem. Thank
don't want
you.
to get you in trouble.
Yes.
Right. We also have quite many questions in the chat. Let's take some of them. Valeria is asking, Valeria, by the way, thank you to let me know that I read your name right. So Valerie is asking, how important is the title of your job in terms of salary range? Does it impose a salary cap?
It might. Um, um, it might, I think, at least in a sense that if the title difference implies differences in responsibility. For example, different in scale, for example, budget scale that you're responsible for, or if you move from if a position implies that you do or don't have people who are responsible to you, and things like that. So therefore, titles can be important, and I think they are more important in more traditional companies and more traditional industries. In some, in sort of smaller companies and startup scene and things like that, I think they are less meaningful. But if something is senior manager or senior this or senior that, it does imply a salary difference. Therefore, you should, pay a little bit of attention to that. But I mean, it's not the most important thing, but it does imply salary difference.
Right. Then Anna before was asking about how much is a percentage of increase typically. Is it like, for example, 10% or what is reasonable to ask?
Yeah, I don't think there is. Some percentage figure that I can give. But if you are, for example, moving from the managerial position, from a specialist to a managerial position within the same company, you can use these same tools that I mentioned earlier to sort of search for salary ranges. But I don't think there is a percentage increase that I can say or give. But these type of background research that you have to do when you're applying for a job, you can do at this stage as well. And then if your workplace has a shop steward, you can ask their advice in these matters as well, because they usually have a better idea of the salary ranges within the job, and they usually have very good information about salary ranges within that same industry. So they are a good resource for information. So in that sense, trade union membership in Finland comes with multiple benefits, and one benefit is access to these type of information and this type of personalized help from trade unions. I know that in many cultures, trade union membership usually can imply something about a person's political affiliation. In Finland, it doesn't. Currently, I think about 67% of Finnish wage earners belong to the trade union. So it's very common, and it doesn't say anything about your political affiliation. But they are a good source of information.
All right. Then Walid is asking, because he joined late, he didn't hear, but neither I think we mentioned it. What is a good stage when you ask about the salary? I assume in the hiring process. I remember I heard something like who starts to talk about the salary loses. Is there truth to that saying or no?
I don't know. I mean, I've applied to cases where I've had to give a salary request, and the last time I did that, my request was higher than they were willing to pay. But the time that we started negotiating for that salary was when they had decided that they wanted to hire me. So at that point, I had the advantage in the sense that they wanted me. so that was a good place to start. I wouldn't, I mean, if you are being interviewed, I wouldn't, in the interview, I would not ask it. I would not ask, you know, I would not start the negotiations there, because that is not a good place to focus on salary. You have to be motivated by something else at that point. But when it becomes clear that they do indeed want you, that's a good place to start.
Right, I think we have time for one more question from the audience, and then probably we are going to go to networking tables, and if Minna stays with us, we can ask some more there. But I'm going to take one more now from Daniela. Daniela is asking how to manage a situation with your boss where you clearly feel that she doesn't respect you because you're a foreigner, and when asked about the salary, ignores you.
Again, trade union, shop steward, they are the ones that can help you with these type of situations. I mean, legally, for example, if you suspect that you are not being paid fairly, you can ask your employer for the justifications for your current salary, and they have to give you a justification in writing. That's their legal responsibility. They have to be able to justify in writing why they are paying you what they are paying. If you then suspect that you are being paid less than somebody else based on, for example, your nationality or ethnic origin, the shop steward is usually the first person to contact and start discussing these type of discrimination issues. And then yhdenvertaisuusvaltuutettu is one that sort of handles discrimination issues that are based on ethnicity or national origin and things like that. And then also SAK, one of the largest employee trade confederation, they have a specific phone line for immigrant workers where they can sort of answer to questions. They don't give personalized help in that sense, but at least they can give you information where you can turn to next. And so they have labor lawyers and people who are well versed in labor law helping in those phone lines. So that is one place to contact as well. But if you work in a workplace that has a shop steward, turn to them for help.
All right, so today's topic seems to be raising a lot of questions, but we are a little bit over time. So I suggest we continue the conversation in the tables. But the very last thing that I want to ask from Minna is that if after today's session our guests want to contact you or get services at Finnwards, what is a good way to approach you, Minna?
You can email me. My contact information is on the website. There's also contact forms that then come directly to me, but you don't have to go through the forms, and you can just find my email address on our web pages. But it's also minna.frank@finnwards.com. So that is, let me write it down. Can't talk and write at the same time, so I always have to fall silent. There we go.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Yes, but I want to thank very much Minna and our audience today for coming and discussing this topic. Of course, 45 minutes is difficult to cover all the aspects, but I hope we can all stay a little bit in the tables and talk more. Thank you very much for coming, everyone, today. And on behalf of Shortcut, wishing you a good day.
Yes, before we jump in, can we have a round of applause? Fly some flying emoji, and I will take a snapshot from the. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The room will be open, so feel free to stick around, talk to the people in the table. You can teleport yourself. So if you are not in a rush, now it's time for networking. And Mina, you're very welcome to join us. Maybe stay for like 10 minutes if you join one of the table. I'm pretty sure some people will still want to ask something.
Yeah, I can stay for a while.
All right, the room is open. The tables are also open. And I think me and Katarina will also join the table for a while. So feel free to come approach us. Have a very nice day, everyone.